Hello, everyone. This is Steve D'Antonio from Whole Family Healthcare with Yo Adrian, our Director of Neurofeedback Services and the creator of Neurologics. We're here today to discuss mental health. How are you doing today, Adrian?
Doing good, Dr. D'Antonio. How about you?
Excellent, thank you. So, Whole Family Healthcare, we've got this balance wheel of health and wellness. And you can see on the bottom part of the balance wheel, one of the main components that we're going to talk today that has to do with overall health is your mental health. And so, there's a lot of stuff going around with COVID right now, and everybody's got their opinions. But what we do know is things have changed, and we've got new pressing conditions that we're having to deal with more frequently. And today's goal is to just educate everybody on what their options are as far as evaluating what's going on and different treatment options that they might not be aware of and that are natural and effective. And we just really want to make sure that people have tools because mental health issues are significant. They were significant before COVID, and they're certainly more magnified now due to the isolation. So very excited to talk to you today about mental health and with one of the leading experts in the Central Florida community, Adrian Quevedo. So shall we dive in?
Yeah, initially, my big question is, what would you say you guys, as providers, and I know we have quite a diverse group of providers in office, but what would you say are, the top two things that people have been coming in for a little bit, that you're seeing more of, I guess, in the office from a mental health perspective? What would you say those things are?
I mean, anxiety and depression are probably the two things that are magnified with the isolation. We've got our, typical extroverts that love being around people, and for a variety of reasons, they're unable to do so. Either they're working from home, and they're not used to that, and they don't like it, but that's what they've been mandated to do by their companies. And then, with all these unknowns of things that we're going through as a country, all the extra stuff, school starting. There's always anxiety with school starting with parents, teachers, and students. Now with the COVID, and it's just a whole new world. And so we're just trying to provide, options and solutions to help people manage their lives better and give them a better quality of life. And so that's what we'll be talking about today.
From an evaluation perspective, I know that we do our brain maps that we talk about, quite a bit. But what are other tools that you guys have, or that I would say, I keep saying you guys, but that we have in office for, really kind of these symptoms that you're talking about with anxiety and depression? What are things that kind of key you in? Are we talking about metabolics, hormones, you know, nutrition? I mean, what would you say some of the top things that kind of trigger you, that or key you into that this is something related to anxiety or depression?
Well, the three things that I use most frequently are the Zytoscans. And so that provides really good usable information while I'm taking a history. And then the two tests that we've been using a lot of are the adrenal stress index, which is a salivary cortisol panel. And it can really show how well the main gland, the adrenal glands, are handling the new stressful situation that the body's having to adapt to. And what's a corollary with the adrenal testing is the urine neurotransmitters that also has an adrenal component with it. So if you want to pull up one of those, Adrian, that's a pretty non-invasive, easy way to get usable information. So this is a combination urine and saliva sample. So the saliva sample will test the adrenal hormones, will test your cortisol at different times of the day, your DHEA, which is another very important adrenal hormone and has very important impacts on the immune system. And then closer to the top there, those are all the urine neurotransmitters. And there's a correlation between the urine neurotransmitters and the ones that are up in the brain. And so Adrian and I work very closely with people trying to optimize these profiles so that they have all the building blocks, proper digestion, so that the body can make the proper stress chemicals. And then what we do once we have everything built up, the neurologics program with the neurofeedback is extremely effective, especially when the neurotransmitters are coming into balance. And so
Yeah, and
very
it's,
non-invasive, and we can also repeat that test after we do strategies and do some training with the brain. Um, Adrian, go ahead. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
no, no. I just wanted to point out that there's a big difference between getting a blood draw and doing urine and saliva. I mean, this test, the one thing I really liked about it is that, and nothing, not knocking blood draws, but for the little ones and for people that have a tough time with getting poked or or stuck for a blood sample, these labs now are, because they're urine and saliva. They're easy to do in office, or you can send people home with the kits to be able to do that at home, and it's non-invasive. If we're just looking at the neurotransmitters, we're just looking at a urine collection. The cortisol and the DHEA is what we look at for the saliva. But in a lot of cases, when we do a full panel initially, and then we have to do follow-ups, it's nice to just have someone do just the urine portion of it, and look at the inhibitory neurotransmitters, which are meant to calm the nervous system down with your serotonin and GABA, and the ones that kind of bring you up are the excitatory neurotransmitters. So one thing that I learned that was really neat when I was going through a certification for these neurotransmitters testing, was the description of adrenal fatigue in the 3 different stages, which I'll do like the highlighted points, and you're way better versed in it than I am. But the neat thing that they explained was that the 3 specific phases are that you have compensatory and excitatory neurotransmitters. And in a phase 1 adrenal fatigue, your excitatory neurotransmitters are really high constantly, and really pinging that HPA axis, which is a hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, that then over time, you have to create an increase in inhibitory neurotransmitters to maintain homeostasis. And that's what they call stage 2. And then over time, because you can only, be running at 1,000 miles an hour for so long, that eventually you deplete all those and you're at stage 3 adrenal fatigue. That's how they explained it to me when I was going through that. Is that similar to how you would describe it to people, or is there additional information that people should know?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great description, Adrian. And you can really um, kind of gauge with the history how long people have been under stress. And when you just show them, hey, your body adapted for a period of time, but now it's just running on fumes. It's a really nice objective test to show them, explain why they feel the way they do. Um, because our conventional colleagues, they only test cortisol, and if it's really high, like you have a tumor secreting it, or extremely low where you're about to die, those are the only types of adrenal issues that they really address. And so this is where, integrative practitioners shine, because we can identify the in-betweens where most people live and show the ramifications of stress. And just to another point, like Adrian said, nothing against blood draws. We still have a very active lab where people are coming in and getting their blood drawn for a variety of issues. But these kits are nice because we can ship them to you anywhere in the country, and you can collect it at home, send it in, and so this just kind of opens up the opportunity for more people to have access to this.
Yeah, and I really like how they present the information. It's pretty easy to read. It makes it pretty obvious if something's high or something's low. They just put an H or an L next to it, and then we report that information back. It's pretty clear to see, and then they can go into the nutrition, or what they call the restorative phase, or just the initial phase of just really isolating what's changing. And the retest process is pretty simple too, because again, it's just a real simple urine collection, and then we get current values and previous values, and we have our reference and our optimal ranges, which not a lot of labs will put this optimal range in, which I thought was really neat that they do, because you've got your reference range, which is where where most people are, but then they do indicate optimal ranges, which I thought was super useful, because you can kind of see if you're kind of hitting the mark, but then the optimal ranges are pretty, pretty nice to look at. Um, so then obviously when we have the testing done, we can also pair that with, do you want to jump into the brain map real quick and kind of look at that and see how it compares?
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
Aaron, what's going to change faster? Would you say, in your experience, the urine test, the neurotransmitters, or would you say the actual map itself would change faster based on doing some type of therapy, whether it be neurofeedback, nutrition, supplements, medications, or IV therapies?
so say the first part of the question. I didn't quite hear that. Sorry.
When we're monitoring treatment, so to let people know if they're progressing, what do you, in your experience, what typically changes faster? So what would be indicated to repeat sooner, the brain
Oh,
map?
yeah. Yeah, no, I get you now. Yeah, that's a really good question because it really depends. I mean, what we found out is that being that the brain's electrochemical, we like to look at both because sometimes people metabolically change much quicker with supplementation and nutrition, and sometimes they progress much quicker with doing the neurofeedback. The neurofeedback, is designed to really encourage the brain to change these brainwave patterns, which from a neurofeedback versus medication perspective, the results and the changes happen much quicker when you use medication therapy, but there's pluses and minuses to that. Whereas with neurofeedback, there's virtually no negative or no ill effects or no side effects. Um, Neurotransmitter testing and supplementation, kind of the same thing. I mean, it's relatively easy to adjust. But to short answer to your question, it really depends on the individual, which I think as providers, that's a great thing because we have different tools in the toolbox that some people respond better to, and our job as providers is to use the tools that work best with individuals, and then kind of cater to that. So if some people, in a lot of cases, if they're not responding well to the neurofeedback, we'll take a pause from the neurofeedback and we'll have you jump in and take a look at their digestive health and see if there's any allergies or food sensitivities or immunoglobulins that may be active or environmental toxins or things that may be affecting them. And then we come back to the neurofeedback later on when we've got more of a balanced playing field. So great question, but yeah, I mean, I would say that it really just depends, and that's a great thing because we have so many tools in office to be able to see what works best with a specific individual.
Yeah, I was kind of testing you. Yeah. We definitely cater, we individualize our treatments. We don't do cookie cutter approaches. So, I mean, you may even have same family member come in and be approached differently and have the same symptoms. So, yeah, we really pride ourselves in trying to identify the cause, really digging deep, and then individualizing or customizing treatment plans.
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the brain map process. We talked about the neurotransmitter piece, which is the chemical aspects, but the EEG or the electroencephalogram or brain waves is really, what the meat of my career has been spent in the last 22 years in really looking and diving into EEG and how it affects the brain. The neurotransmitter piece came along much later when I realized that the brain is connected to this digestive system amazingly. We through science, we discovered that the brain's connected to the gut. Not too big of a surprise, but it really does make a difference. But from an EEG perspective, we know that when we have an individual that has this really focused high amount, and you can see on the graph here, you've got yellows and red indicating high, that this beta frequency, which is between 15 and 20 hertz in the brain, or 15 to 20 cycles per second, this area here specifically, when we have elevations anywhere in this frontal area, we can typically see that correlates highly with the psychological testing and consistent with neurotransmitter testing and just overall wellness testing and psych testing, that they're going to exhibit symptoms related to anxiety. So as we're evaluating that and looking at it, we can see that when we get the map report back, sure enough, this individual, came back almost at a 10 out of 10 for overarousal, which is, pretty synonymous with symptoms related to anxiety and that overarousal, that high adrenal, high sympathetic nervous system mode, which is that really fight or flight mode. And we see that pretty clearly from the map images and then from the dashboard. And then just so people kind of have a little bit of a idea of what that looks like on a live brain map, this is the same individual again. And you can kind of see that this frontal, so this is like looking at the person dead on. So this would be their right side, this would be their left. This is looking at them dead on, straight ahead. And you can see that there is that glowing little red area and that beta frequency that doesn't seem to want to let off. So this is kind of like the images that we show people, kind of like a weather map that indicates areas of high and low concentration. And you can see as we're kind of spinning around all the different areas that that beta frequency is really isolated and pocketed in that frontal part, which again correlates very high with anxiety symptoms, with high overarousal, with high adrenal output, with high sympathetic mode, low parasympathetic, which is that healing, restful state, the repair mode that the body goes through. So we have so many different tools that pointed us at the direction of this individual really having, you know, all the classic things that are synonymous and related to anxiety.
Adrian, can I comment on that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, this is a really, really common thing, and without even having the map on all our patients, we do know that there's a certain part of the brain called the hippocampus, that there's a filter, essentially, and when external stresses come in, it comes in through that filter, and we get an appropriate response. Now, over time, when the body's under chronic stress, that filter wears down, and so everything that comes in, whether it's a minor stress or major stress, we get an exaggerated response. And then basically that patient's on fire all the time because they're having a heightened response. And the body can only maintain that for so long. And so the map itself is it's a very nice visual to show you exactly what's going on. And then Adrian's team can precisely target that. And then my job, when I work with folks in conjunction is, we also do things to support the adrenal glands and help make that filter close back up so that we get an appropriate response and not an exaggerated one. And that could be as simple as getting more restorative sleep, exercise. Not everything's taken a supplement, but the herbal adaptogens can also be extremely helpful for those situations too.
Yeah, and as you can see, just like you indicated, this individual, really high output in that parahippocampal gyrus, which again, we're seeing a lot of those red areas pop up. And again, really neat that you pointed that out, because we can zoom in and literally just pick apart that specific area with with this type of technology. But it's easier to see obviously when we have so many different points from, like you mentioned, the adrenals, from the EEG, from the metabolic testing. I mean, it all kind of ties in. And we're seeing a lot more of it because of what's happening with the current environment, and what's happening with how we're having to isolate, and how we're being stuck in the same place and not really able to get out and have that routine. We have, my background is in mental health, and my graduate training is in mental health, specifically in counseling and in a therapeutic environment. And you talked about these individuals or people who are your kind of extroverts, who already tend to be, a little bit higher wired, we can call it that. And now we've got to basically lock them into a specific place where they're not interacting or being social with other people like they are, to get the outlets that they typically have to kind of just release this bottled up energy is now being contained. So we're seeing elevations, really high amounts of this, anxiety and overarousal features. And even in the testing, this stuff changes so quickly that even individuals between testing from 8 to 12 weeks, we can see that there's significant elevations in the excitatory neurotransmitters that are just flooding, the brain and the entire cortex and the entire resource of the nervous system of the brain. So it's really, really easy to see. And again, looking at the map reports, we can see what it's isolating from a overarousal perspective. You can get increased anger, self-deprecation, irritability. All these things are things that obviously drive that person into further states and higher levels of anxiety. And there's ways to evaluate that, and there's ways to treat that, without having to resort to, everything from alcohol to Xanax. So I mean, it's a slippery slope when we're getting into these really high states of anxiety because of the situation going on with COVID.
Yeah. Now there's a time and place for all those medications, but it's some of them have really strong rebound effects when you stop taking it, and so people will have a hard time coming off of it. So
Yeah.
I think we gave anxiety a fair shake. It's our quiet patients too, and it's the quiet kids or the quiet spouses that suffer with depression. And when they come in just for routine evaluations, oh, I'm coming in for elbow pain. We scan them or we start talking about things. There's a lot of people with pretty significant depression walking around too.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother feature on the brain map reports. This individual, didn't have a lot of those depressive features, but when we look at the map reports and we're looking at brain maps and the alpha frequency, if that pocketing would have taken place more in the frontal areas this is normal. We should see that alpha a little bit further back in the brain. But if we were to see that red pocketing up here in the frontal areas in the front or the right or the left, we would, again, it would match up pretty well, synonymous with a lot of the testing that indicates that depressive symptomology. Really neat. I don't know if I ever told you this because it's something uh, that isn't really discussed often, but when we're looking at these brain map reports, we can actually tell, depending on where the elevated alpha or the 8 to 12 hertz frequency is residing, whether or not someone is dealing with an acute depression or a chronic depression. So we see acute depression, typically elevated alpha on the right side, and if it migrates and moves over to the entire left side of the brain, along with parts and features within the midline of the brain and the right, and we see this really heavy alpha output up here in the front. That's pretty typical that we see in EEG and quantitative EEG for people that are dealing with chronic depression. So you talked about measuring progression. We can see progression in depression. That rhymes. Progression in depression from the left side, elevated alpha, as it migrates and infiltrates or from the right side over to the left. We can see that this alpha frequency has that major depressive, suppressive features, which is what we typically see in depression.
Yeah, Adrian, I always learn something new when I talk to you about the brain.
We're always learning too. That this stuff comes out sometimes, and there's so many updates. It's the human brain, so we're always going to be learning about it. So we could talk all day about this stuff, I think.
All right, as far as, if a patient has pretty significant depression, um, most of the patients that come to see me initially for that, they're already seeing either a psychiatrist and are on medications and or a counselor. So we make sure that they certainly have resources. And then we really hone in on what we do, which is, the nutritional components. So the body has the right building blocks to make its own neurotransmitters. And then we look at some of the genetic things like MTHFR. Some people have really strange metabolic issues where they don't process the nutrient folate well. And so sometimes just supplementing with methylfolate, methyl B12, fancier versions of these nutrients can, in essence, turn the lights on. And they're like, wow, this is what everybody else feels like. But as far as, what I do, those help about 50% of the time. But the other half of the cases, the neurofeedback is probably the most significant thing that they do that improves their depression. So
And
I
and
don't know
even
if I
and
share some
even to
cases with you. Yeah.
and even to piggyback on that piece, I mean, once we do have, you know, the neurofeedback in place, a lot of times people will start to experience a lot of the things that we know are related to mental health issues, and we refer out. We refer to therapists and counselors and everyone that can help the individual, deal with the symptoms and the things that are going on in relationship to that, because our job is not to talk them through the process. The brain training is part of, the process, but once people kind of get into those stages where they're really feeling and dealing with a lot of the symptoms that are related to the mental health components, we always tell people to talk with the therapist, to work with the counselor, to talk these things through, because neurofeedback has a fantastic way of really making people aware of what they're thinking. And sometimes they don't like what they hear because that mental fog lifts and that inner voice comes out, and sometimes it's not pleasant. So when we see that or hear that's happening with the individual, we definitely refer them out to the professionals that can talk them through that process. So it's a great point there.
Yeah, we definitely believe in the team approach.
Yeah. So so yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about about the new stuff on the website, which looks fantastic. Let me get back to that so we can close out with that. Here we are. So again, if we've got this health wheel, I think this is so cool, man. Hadn't seen that before, but look at all that. There's just so many things on there that we can address. Stress reduction, diet, nutrition, immune. Yeah, this is really neat. So Dr. Lee, I'll let you close out. And got phone number up here. We got the website, so I'll let you close out. And this was great. I really enjoyed doing this. And in the coming weeks, we'll cover another topic. We got plenty of stuff to talk about here, so we'll keep everyone pretty well informed. And thanks again for letting me come on.
Adrian, it was always wonderful speaking with you. You know, we're definitely invested in the Central Florida community and beyond, wherever we can provide information. And please just use it as a resource. That balance wheel does give a lot of good useful information, whether you're local here in Central Florida and you have access to come see us here, or if you just got questions where we can get you plugged into some of our colleagues around the country, we'd be happy to do so. But don't hesitate to reach out. Definitely have lots of ways to educate people, and that's what we're here for, to help people through these times.
All right, Dr. D, good talking to you. We'll pick this up next time with another topic. And again, as always, anyone has any questions, feel free to call. Plenty of people up front that can answer a lot of the questions at the 407-644-2990 or visit at wholefamilyhealthcare.com.
God bless you, Adrian. See you, everybody.
Same to you. Take care.